Hi, this is Bobby Broom, and this is Coffee Talk.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kim Perlak. I'm the chair of the guitar department at Berklee College of Music, and welcome to another Coffee Talk. As usual, we are joined by Assistant Chair Sheryl Bailey. Hey, Sheryl.
Hey, got my coffee mug.
Get your mug. Yeah. And this time, and for the all new season episodes, we're going to be joined by our new senior coordinator, Ben Cody. Hey, Ben.
Hello. It's exciting to be here for my first time not as a guest.
This is so great. We loved our former co-host Ian Steed. He's moved up in the world to another great position at Berklee and is also currently on tour with a wonderful band. And so we're just thrilled for him and glad to have been with us. And this day, our guest is the great jazz guitarist and alum of Berklee, Bobby Broom. Hi, Professor. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. So how do you take your coffee?
Very dark and a little cream, a little sweetener. I use coconut sugar, oat milk, and several years ago, my wife bought me an Illy coffee press machine that just does the pods.
Mm-hmm.
Illy lover, or just a, dark roast, rich coffee lover. So I do that, or a heaping like I just did of instant, freeze dried kind of stuff.
Oh, nice.
Little chocolate when I can to make it, kind of mocha-like.
I'm a dark coffee lover as well. And I'm wondering, a lot of people have said that over time, the coffee choices have changed, and especially in relationship to all the different aspects of your career. Do you feel like being on tour or being a teacher, or how has all that shaped your love of coffee?
Yeah, well, definitely being on tour. I've always liked coffee. When I was a kid, my parents would let me have it on the weekends. So I could have it on Saturdays and Sundays, and not Fridays because that was school day. And I would drink my cup, and it was like Taster's Choice freeze dry, instant. And I'd drink my cup and go right back to bed on a Saturday morning, after cartoon, Sunday too. So it did not have that kind of effect on me that I knew of, at least at that time. But I think, so I've always liked coffee, saying all that to say. And then, from years of traveling around and all over the world, really, but, in Europe where, and Italy and Spain and those countries where, you can get good coffee and it's just a normal thing for them to put great coffee on the table, you kind of, your tastes expand and, you become aware of what really good coffee is.
It's so funny that you say that, because when you said Italy, it reminded me of one of your musical collaborators is our vice president here at Berklee, Ron Savage.
Right.
And he has this whole thing he told us about on this show that he'll only drink coffee in Italy now because of his touring experience.
You mean only in Italy, or really?
I think that's what he said. From what I understand, he's like, otherwise it's tea, because it was so good in Italy that you can't reproduce that. So he only wants the best there.
Yeah.
So-
Yeah. There's a little spot at the Umbria Jazz Festival when you come out of their main hotel. It's right there on the corner before you go do your thing. And it was they made Ellie, and it was just, that's kind of what made me get the coffee press. Yeah.
See, these are things that you would have to know when we get to your advice for people who want to be band leaders. You have to kind of be aware, right, of all of these little things about your people.
Yeah, it's a lot. Yeah.
So before we get there to some of the things that you've been doing, and more recently, you were a student here at Berklee. And a lot of the people who are listening to this are coming to Berklee for the first time, or they're preparing to. And you've had a number of different first days. You've had your first day as a student, and then you've come back as a guest, and you've come back to teach here, and to be here different lengths of time. Is there anything that stands out about that first experience for you as a student, like what you remember, what your impressions were, and then maybe something about a different time when you came back as a professional?
Well, I'll tell you about my very first experience with Berklee. I think I was a senior in high school, and I was trying to figure out, this is 1977, 78. I was trying to figure out where I was going to go to college. And the choices for someone like myself who was, focused on jazz music, the choices were limited at that time. There were only a handful of colleges and universities that offered, focuses on jazz music. So Berklee, of course, was an obvious choice. So I had a buddy that we grew up together and playing in the same little neighborhood band. And he was a year older than me, played guitar as well. And was a year older and was already attending Berklee. So my parents arranged for us to make a visit. And my first impression was that looking around the street, the city streets around the school, all I saw were guitar cases. And I was like, man, everybody here plays the guitar. I'm not coming here. So that was really what I thought. And then I got over that, whatever it was, impression, fear, and did decide to come. And yeah, there were a lot of guitar players when I got here. And I made it my business not to worry about any of them. Only the ones that I thought I could learn or have fun with playing. So I got together with Joe Cohn, with Kevin Eubanks, with a few of my freshman friends, not a few, a couple of my freshman friends. Trying to think if there were any other guitar players. I wasn't able to have access to Mike Stern. I didn't know him. He was a, hot shot and stuff. But yeah, so that was how I operated. And other than that, I was sitting at my desk with my little cassette player and my records and whatever, practicing. Like this. I remember I used to walk into the Berklee dorm and Steve Vai would be holding court with a crowd around him in the lobby of the dorm building, which is what, 1140, Boylston. What's the address of that main, that used to be the dorm building on the corner. Slice used to be across the street.
150 Mass Ave.
Is that 150 Mass? Well, yeah, I don't remember.
Well, there was 1140 and 150.
1140 is
something else.
Yeah, I think it was. I'm trying to think I can't think of the address, but in any case, where the dorms were, and then Vi would be there playing and people oohing and ahhing around him. And I don't think I ever really stopped. I just kind of got on the elevator and went up to my room to do what I had to do,
I think I love that you're thinking about that, who you went to school with, and you're thinking about these names, you're thinking about, because I think that a lot of students, it's hard for them to imagine, it's hard to imagine when you're young, like what your life is going to be like in 20 years, but I think everybody loves this idea that you could meet people when you go to a place like Berklee and then be lifelong friends and collaborators with them. And I know this relationship that you have with Ron Savage is a long-term relationship. Musically, is that true? Did you meet when you were at Berklee, or is that more recent?
We met when I was at Berklee, but more recently. Yeah.
You started playing together more recently. Did you remember each other? Is that like a unexpected connection that you made as a musician later in life?
In a way, no. He went to Berklee. He attended Berklee after I'd already left.
Okay.
According to him, my name was still buzzing around, but that's what he says. But he did go to Berklee with one of my band members who I've been working with for 30 plus years, the bassist, Dennis Carroll. So when I visited Berklee at that time, I decided that I wanted to have fun with the situation that I was involved in. So I flew my trio in, but these are both my longtime collaborators, Dennis and drummer Kobe Watkins. And we've all been working together for over 25 years. So when Dennis and Ron saw each other, it was like one of these reunion things. They went to school together. Yeah.
That's wild.
And Ron and I just hit it off, just hit it off, and probably personally and musically. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What do you think makes a long-term collaboration for you? What is it about someone when you're like, wow, it's been 25 years, could you put your finger on it?
Well, a lot goes into that. I've found that when I make music, there has to be some kind of simpatico that occurs that maybe transcends music in a way. I mean, it does, of course, encompass music like altogether. And then that leads to other connections, like, what goes into one's aesthetic, what goes into one's perceptions about music, life, whatever. Those are all important things that develop a person's musical self, presentation, as I said, aesthetic. So you have to have some things in common, usually, don't have to, but it's nice because you've got to get along then and be together off the bandstand, probably more than on. You have to withstand life and the vicissitudes of that, most of which happen off the bandstand, just to be able to get on the bandstand. So yeah, you need more than just, oh, that's a great player. They're great players. I mean, that's part of it, but there's way more involved than that. So yeah, I think that, I don't know if that makes sense, but that's what, I think that's what, I mean, and this wasn't a planned thing, like I'm gonna work with these guys for 25 plus years or 30 years. It just happened.
Yeah.
It just happened. Your things happen and you think it's over and then it's not. It just, life keeps going, hopefully.
So I have a question for you that's sort of related to that. And then I really want to hear what Sheryl has to say too. But musically, as a classical musician, one of the things I love to hear when I listen to people is their tone. And I was particularly struck by your tone when I heard your concert here at Berklee, because I just loved the fullness of your sound. And I loved when you played with Ron. I love the way that he was able to play really bright and light and brushwork and all kinds of intricate patterns. And because you had this very full melody that came through your instrument. And I'm wondering, like, what are the ways that you have over the years developed your tone and your sound? And do you think of it as something that like is personal to you and is kind of like a constant? Or do you feel like as you play with different groups, things sort of shift about it? Like, how do you think about your own sound?
Yeah, that's for a guitar player. Well, I won't say that, because when you play with different groups and you play different styles of music or whatever that is, that guitar players do a lot of. Guitar is one of those instruments that some people don't have to pick a genre. They can play across styles or, within a certain overarching style, there are different. Here's Dennis calling me now. Call you back. There are different styles or whatever, different, So thinking about jazz, what does that even mean? Like jazz guitar, okay, there's this sound and that sound, and then these other sounds. So as guitar players, we can all be, oh, this must be urgent, but I can't talk right. I got to call you back. We can be fluid in terms of stylistically, right? We don't have to have one sound, or we can be one of our attributes or one of our selling points or characteristics of our playing or style or whatever is that we're malleable and we can fit in these different settings because of the fluidity of our sound. I didn't come from that school of jazz guitar. Although I grew up in the 70s and all I heard was rock guitar for the most part. And I guess, some blues or some clean tone things, whatever was on the radio, but for the most part it was rock guitar. And I had a big muff. I had a solid body. I started out just wanting to play guitar, whatever that meant. It wasn't jazz. But I never felt comfortable with that sound for me, right? When I heard it was first George Benson, that spoke to me. Actually, maybe before that, it was on a Charles Earland record. It was Melvin Rhyne, but it didn't really hit me like that's what I wanted to do. I just loved that record, Black Talk by Charles Earland, the organist. But so that was when I was 10. And so I was like aware of something that I liked in some different style that I didn't even know what it was called or that it was called anything. But then when I heard George and that sound specifically, that was like, that's it right there. That's what I want to do because I was already playing guitar. Then I heard Wes. It was like, duh. My teacher had been telling me that for years. And I had a jazz guitar teacher from like age 12 or 13 for a couple of years. So 13 and 14, I was studying with a jazz guitar player up in Harlem. Who was just kind of showing me the ropes. We just play tunes or whatever. And he, gave me a little theory, had me spell chords and stuff like that. But so hearing him on a weekly basis probably had a big influence. But like I said, the aha moment was hearing that first George Benson record, which was Bad Benson, and hearing that tone. And so going forward, although I had to try to function in the real world of my own, which was you need to have different sounds and you need to play funk and you need to do this and that and the other, I would try to do it. And to some degree, I was a little successful, but I never felt comfortable for real. I was always practicing to be probably what I am today. I always thought in terms of my own sound and tone that I sounded funny, whatever that means, but that's how I experienced it. Probably because it didn't sound like Pat Martino, it didn't sound like Wes or Joe, it didn't sound like those people. It sounded like me in some weird way. I didn't like it. When you hear yourself speak on a recording, you go like, ew, that's how I sound. And other people are going, oh, that sounds great. You need to do radio. So it's kind of like that. But I do remember the day, and I had moved to Chicago by then. And I remember practicing, and something struck me like, oh, what did I just do? And I played, and I kind of liked that. And it was a combination of a bunch of things, probably. It was the sound, it was something I was doing, improvisationally, just something, the whole character of whatever it was struck me like, that's okay. This is it right here. You need to like develop this, exploit this, remember this. And that I remember that was probably in my mid-20s, 26 or 7 that happened. And there have been iterations of it. I listen to some records and go, dang, you were really playing with a lot of treble during that time. Or vice versa. You really had rolled off a lot of, you were rolling off a lot of the tone knob on the guitar during this year, these years, or whatever. But overall, you know, the sound comes from here, and everybody has their own signature sound, and you just, like what happened to me, you have to realize it, accept it, and hopefully embrace it and try to develop it.
I love what you just said. And for people who are listening and not watching, when he said the sound comes from here, he showed his hands. And I think that's so true and so wise, and something that's sometimes when you play an electric instrument can be overlooked to your own detriment. And I'm just wondering, like, when that day came, when you were in your 20s and you heard something about your sound that really sparked your own ear, do you remember what it was that you heard that you liked?
No, no, it was just something didn't sound funny. It sounded good. That general.
Yeah, like you were centered in it or something. It sounded right to you.
Sounded right. It sounded like okay. It didn't sound funny.
I love this.
Yeah.
I like it because I think I was just talking to students about this the other day, that it's sometimes you have to remind yourself to listen for the things that you like, the things that do sound right to you, because you get it really attuned for a long time, and to listen to the things that don't sound right.
Critically, yeah.
Yeah. And you have to do that. That's obvious, but also building on that strength is very powerful. And I also love that you said that you did it in your 20s, because I think it's good for people to know that there's a long time that you're searching for your sound, much longer than you might imagine when you're like 19 or 20 years old.
Yeah, because, you know, everybody's supposed to be a prodigy, and everybody's supposed to have, you know, accomplished whatever at whatever age you're comparing yourself to, whichever person you're aspiring to be like. You know, come on. Everybody's road is different, and everybody's life is different. So
yeah,
the sooner you realize that, the better.
Hey, Sheryl, what's on your mind?
Well, I have one question that was sparked when you're talking about when you first got here, but it actually ties into what you're talking about here, is about this pressure and comparison and all of this. And now I think, you know, this younger generation with social media, it's a big deal. I mean, not even just with musicians, just with people every day, like looking at everyone's beautiful life and like, why isn't my life beautiful? Or what are these things? Or why don't I play that fast? Or why don't I have all those hip harmonic ideas and all of that? And it can be overwhelming to find that place where you're like, this is my voice and I'm cool with it. And that, you know, and because I mean, that to me was always what struck me about jazz, is it was always about finding your own voice. You know, you go through the thing where you imitate people and you learn your acts and you learn the language that way. But there's that certain point where the baby bird gets kicked out of the nest and you become your own, you fly, you start to fly in your way. But that also made me, because the thing that I thought about first to talk with you about was, you were talking about, you know, when you were a kid and you came to Berklee and you saw all these guitar players and you were like, I don't want to go, and you had a fear. You trace that to fear. So I think this also connects also with that. It's like this fear of you know, being judged, or this fear of not, you know, I got to be the best. What if I'm not the best now? Or that, you know, any of these things that we're scared of. But and especially as an improviser, right? You have to be able to feel like, I'm going to go in. You know, people ask me all the time, what are you going to play? I'm like, I might not know till a couple measures ahead. Mm-hmm. I don't know what you're going to play. I don't know, you know, like and to embrace that, I'm definitely for improvised music, whatever that is you've got to be able to feel comfortable with not knowing. And so it just made me think, you know, you can pick up on any of those in there in terms of like, you know, the comparison or you're feeling comfortable with yourself, but how do you face fear?
Wow. some of it is, realizing that a lot of fear is self-generated or realized. Like there's nothing actually coming from without. There's nothing that's actually oftentimes, not all the time, coming from without, or that is prompting. It's all in your head, all these thoughts, all these things that you're imagining, then you react to them. So like with the social media and looking at everybody, what everybody's doing and saying, and you don't have to see any of it if you don't turn it on. You can just not see it. That's your choice. As soon as I start scrolling, then I'm subjecting myself to whatever I respond to or react to. I'm on Facebook, but I have found in the last, I don't know, there probably waxes and wanes, but now in the last couple months at least, I'm rarely on there. Like, I just don't need to see who's doing what all the time. It's not important. It doesn't affect me and my life at all, really. So everything with, in moderation. In terms of going into situations musically or otherwise, I've always felt that, well, just thinking about it in the earlier days when I was on, in situations with people I didn't have any reason to be in situations with, like an Al Haig or a Sonny Rollins or, whoever, I would not have been asked had I not been able. So there was no like political anything going on from my end. I just found myself in these situations. Okay, should I be nervous, or were you nervous is the question. And the answer is no. Well, why not? Well, because I was too naive to be nervous, and I was too excited to be in the moment. I just wanted to make music. What did that mean? That means that I could only play what I can, still only play what I can play. I can't be anyone else. I can't do anything else other than what I can do. So I needed to bring that to the table as best I could. And, kind of imagine what that's going to sound like in the moment, if that makes any sense, in the situation. That's what, music making is for an improviser or jazz musician. You're using your imagination a lot. You're imagining these things that you've heard, these lines that you've heard, this music that you've heard, much of which you've practiced. Hopefully you're not hearing things to play that you haven't played already or practiced, because that's a problem. You can't allow yourself to hear that. You have to hear something so you have to be like really keenly in touch with what you can do, what on your instrument. Now, whether it's simple as, according to you or not, you have to make your best presentation of whatever those simple things are. So I don't know if that answers the question, but kind of, sort of.
Yeah, I think that'll be a great segue, into talking about that and facing fears of improvisation and how you practice and tone and all that is the question we ask, all the guests on here, which would be, what do you think is the question that current students should be asking while they're here that maybe is something that they wouldn't think of normally to be asking?
Yeah, when I first heard that question, I thought, wow, I don't know how I would answer that. And I still feel that way. Although I will say this, like I as a professor, I often have the feeling that I wish students ask more questions. Now, I don't know what specifically I want them to ask, but I feel that they're not fully tapping into the resource that's available, or resources that are available to them, right? So, I mean, I think I remember how I was as a youngster, and I hope I would be asking more questions, although, you know, I was dumbfounded when I realized how hard making it in this business was. And I wished some of the elders that I knew from when I was younger had told me. And then I think, you know, like if they had, would it have mattered? Would it have scared me away? You know, so a lot of what we learn, we have to experience firsthand. You know, there's nothing that anyone can really say about a lot of things that are going to hit home the way that one's own personal experience will, right? So that's a cop-out and a way to not answer this question, but it is true. It is true. Yeah.
I don't think it's a cop-out, because I think that you're really right about that. And I wonder, do you think, you know, as you started to sort of discover what we all learn in our own way about the challenges of this profession, and obviously you decided to stay, right? So here you are. Was there something that you feel like you learned that was really significant, whether it was an advice that you got from another musician or someone in your life, or something that you found out on your own that was kind of a moment you think is significant to share?
Not a moment, just maybe a you know, a manifesto or something. I mean, I know that my tenacity and my sense of self came from the upbringing that I had, and came from my parents, you know, who were ordinary people, you know, whatever that means, or extraordinary in their ordinariness. And, you know, they really instilled just that they are who I am. They were who I am. And, you know, I was encouraged to dream and to believe in those dreams. My mother never said, believe in your dreams, but she listened to me talk, and we had conversations back and forth like every day, because it took her a long time to finish dinner. And I would always sit with her every night. And my dad he'd eat and then go watch the news. And I'd sit with my mom till she finished. And we would just back and forth, back and forth. And, you know, I could be myself. I could be silly. I could ask serious questions. We would really, that's encouraging a lot for a youngster. And so that was nurtured. A work ethic was nurtured. You know, a lot of things that, you know, weren't really tangible, or that I can't put my finger on in a aha, you know, this is when it happened, or somebody said. But I took that with me into this field. And in addition to being validated by these figures that I was idolizing on these records, like, oh snap, Al Haig played with Bird. Like, what's going on? What am I doing here? And then, oh, he's got a sub tonight. Oh, that's Walter Bishop Jr. What? You know, so, and they're saying, yeah, kid, you know, you sound good. Like, okay, I must be doing something right. And then Sonny Rollins, like, this is all, so this is emboldening my spirit. And so, you know, okay, so for the youngster listening, well, I'm never going to have these kind of people say that to me. No, you're not going to have those people, but you may have those kinds of people. What do I mean by that? That this jazz I'm speaking of specifically has a line, it's got a lineage of people. These people played with that legend. Then they went on to develop whatever kind of career they had, and certain people played with them, and it goes on and on through the generations like that. So just be aware of that. And yeah, it's not going to be, you know, history is not written about yesterday. It's written about 50 years ago or more. So that's why in Sonny Rollins' new 700-page book, the first half of the book is gloriously detailed. And then by the time they get to where I show up in the 80s or whatever, late 70s, the details get like, whatever. So that's how it goes. That's okay. You know, I don't feel like, well, I'm never going to play with Louis Armstrong. You know, there's just something we need to realize about this music. And so I took these messages and they really, really bolstered my spirit when the chips were down, when I felt like, what's happening? Nothing. Okay. All right. Well, I feel like quitting. Well, I know I'm not going to do that because what else am I going to do? Not like I can't do anything else. Like I don't want to do anything else. And I will not do anything else. And then, oh, something happens that enables me to not have to do anything else for whatever that little period of time is that I need to be distracted from my woes. And life goes on. And that's how it goes. You know, it's not the most fun or glorious way to go about living. You know, there's no security in it, but what does that even really mean? People lose jobs all day. Things happen every day. We don't really have security. Not really. I mean, you know, yeah, if you have a 401k and you can go to work, that's cool. If that's what you call security and that makes you feel better, then do that. But, you know, I want to play music. And so I'm living for the next time I can get on the bandstand and get that feeling that makes it all worthwhile. That doesn't happen very, very often, but often enough. Yeah.
Well, you know, it's interesting what you're saying is you have to trust it. You have to trust your gift and your instinct and your voice. And hearing you, you know, talk about, you know, when you're in the heat of it, right? The best, actually, our professor Guy Van Duzer, I think, described a career the best I've ever heard. He said, when you're in it, it seems like you're zigzagging, but when you're, you know, on the other side and you look back, it's a straight line. Like all those things, those moments where you doubted, and then, you know, Sonny Rollins comes along, or, you know, whoever, these gigs that really changed your career and also your musicianship and your personality and your heart and all of that, in a way that you had that faith to hang in there, and you look back and you go, well, of course, I wouldn't be me without that, right?
Right, that's right. I had a student here who, after his freshman year, he got in touch with me during the summer between his freshman and sophomore year, and he explained that he thought he wanted to drop jazz guitar and major in economics. So he wasn't the most dynamic jazz player at the time, but we had done some serious groundwork that the freshman year, and I was like really excited about working with him going forward, and that he was now equipped, and that now we can, and I knew he was talented. So I just kind of, and I understood because we were in the middle, or, you know, yeah, we were in the middle of the pandemic. And so everything was tenuous and unknown and scary as all get out for everyone, especially a youngster who's thinking about trying to make a career in music. Is there going to be live music anymore? Is there going to be a civilization anymore? Like nobody knew, right? So I just tried to be understanding and said, you know, what you're feeling, I understand. And it maybe is not this is an exaggerated version of it, what we're dealing with now, but this is pretty much how we live, you know, like with the unknown, kind of with a little bit of fear lurking about all the time. And we just have to like brush it off and keep our sights on what we're doing and do it. So, you know, I understand you got to do what you need to do. Well, a week later, he writes back, I think I'm going to minor in music and jazz. And, okay, cool, great, great. And then a week later, he writes back, I'm going to do it. I'm going to stick. I'm going to stay. And I thought, okay, great. So 6 weeks, 8 weeks into the semester, first semester of his sophomore year, boom, he has this epiphany. All of a sudden, he's playing changes, and the things that he could kind of hear linearly were starting to come out. He's starting to understand how to move them on the fretboard, and he's so excited. And I just said, now imagine if you had quit. This might have never happened. First thing. Second thing is, expect to feel the way that you felt early, a different version of the way that you felt earlier. Expect that again. And then expect another one of these, and then those, and these, and those, and these. This is kind of like an investment graph, like what your professor said. Yeah, you're really feeling the valleys, and you see the peaks, but if you look at it from an extended view, you could draw a straight line upward, and that's what it is, hopefully, right? So, yeah.
Sheryl, I was just thinking about you because you're really getting into how people practice and the way that you work on things, what stays consistent in your values and what changes over time. And I don't know if you want to ask some questions about that or talk about that a little bit, because I think it sounds like a nice time to transition into some specifics, some nuts and bolts. So I'm going to throw it over to you.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm always fascinated by how people practice, what they practice. I mean, I'm always interviewing friends, accomplished musicians, and then you ask a student, well, how do you practice? Do you have a plan? And they're like, wow, I got to think about that, And I, the more I teach, the more I'm around, I feel that that's our biggest job, is showing people, well, show them how to fish, right? And so there are a lot, we have a lot of discussions, like, how do you map that out? What are your value? What are the important things that you should have every day or in the course of a practice day? And so anyway, I'm curious, what your thoughts on that and how you approach your own arc of your own practice, and what you advise others to develop.
Well, I definitely am in touch with that. A lot of the way that I teach is founded on just having a thorough grasp of music fundamentals applied to the fretboard. So for me, what did that mean? Because when I really started to practice to get good, as I used to say, I didn't have a teacher, but I had had enough private lessons, and I knew enough music theory. I had taken music theory and as an elective in my junior high school after school class. And my teacher, Jimmy Carter up in Harlem, he would ask me, spell a G7 sharp 5 flat 9, and I'd sit there for 20 minutes and crying. And so I knew enough. I knew how scales were constructed, the derivative minor scales and how you made everything, but I didn't know the fretboard. So I knew what I didn't know on the fretboard. I only knew 2 fingerings for a major scale. That was not good. There were a lot of empty spaces on the fretboard in whatever key I was in. I didn't know what that meant until I stumbled on a Berklee, on a Downbeat magazine article, one of those, how to or woodshed or whatever it was called at the time. 5 fingerings for the major scale for guitar. And that was the day that I realized, this is it right here. Like, this is the difference. Because I know that all the scales are traced back to the major scale. So if there are 5 fingerings for the major scale that span 12 frets, there are 5 fingerings for every scale that span 12 frets. So now I know that I'm not going to be going outside to play after school anymore. I know what I'm going to be doing. And that's what I did. I learned those 5 fingerings. How did I learn them? I took about 2 minutes, more or less, realizing where those dots were according to my fingers and those 4 or 5 frets, and then set the metronome and play those without looking at the dots on the page anymore. I don't need those. I can use my ear and I know what a major scale sounds like. And now I have to play in time. Ooh, this is difficult. Oh, okay, this is what it is. And it wasn't ever drudgery, because I realized in this long view with the real dim light at the end that this is music. I hear music right now. Okay, good. And, just ratcheted up that metronome until I got sick of it, because it was annoyingly clock-like and didn't feel like any music I'd ever heard on the radio. It felt like somebody was pulling me and I didn't like it. And I thought, I can keep time on my own. I can keep 1, 2, 3, 4. Bo, 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 bo. I really have to be aware of all of this. It's about coordination. It's about breathing. It's about a lot of different things that go into this act of making music. And I applied that to chromatically. 1 fingering type chromatically up to about the 10th or 12th fret and back down. That is crazy people stuff. Nobody does that unless you really want to play music. And I really wanted to play music. The other thing I had in my imagination was, this is how classical people must do it. It's got to be even and clean, and that's it. Accurate. Okay. That's what I'm doing. And I did that with every fingering, and then next natural minor. Okay, and then what do you teach? What did they teach next? Okay, then you do the harmonic minor. Well, what about the modes? I didn't know what the modes were, and I had to learn what they were. That was also a downbeat article. Modes on the guitar. Oh, I've been playing the natural minor scale on the minor chord on So What, or Impressions on the Wes Montgomery record, trying to play along, playing the natural minor scale, D natural minor. Something was wrong with my natural minor scale. My natural minor doesn't sound right. What's going on? I remember I went to a couple of teachers, just randomly found teachers in the phone book, trying to ask them what's wrong with, how come I can't, what do you play on a dominant chord that's not the minor pentatonic or the blues scale? And they were like, I don't know what you mean. And I'm like, okay, thank you. So when I heard that Dorian mode, it was like another aha moment. This is meant to be, because the answers are coming. And then I was just putting in the reps, doing the work in a really regimented way. There was nobody telling me, okay, now you need to know this, which is why I teach the way that I do. I have these just prerequisite things that, I think students need. And then after that, it's kind of up to the person to continue on that trajectory. But now you have a practice regimen or a way to, if you develop these things in an efficient and effective way, you've pretty much learned how to practice.
Well, I think what you're saying is so important, is that the motivation was there because you were listening to music and listening to great players. Why practice technique? For bragging rights? I can play my scale at 250 on the metronome. No, you want to work on technique because it helps you play better and facilitate your ideas. And you could see that. Again, you were saying that was the light at the end of the tunnel. That's going to motivate me. I don't need someone telling me you need to practice. You know that inside, because you see, oh, when I work, then my hands develop that facility and all that stuff that goes with that.
Yes.
Now I'm going to play impressions, and I'm going to be able to hang and play what I hear inside, so I think that's really important about what you're saying there, is the motivation to practice all that stuff is for the music.
There's something big in what you said that is not, I can't take it for granted, and I don't now, especially really I've gotten like I'm graduating now, my first graduating class since I've been at this university. And so just seeing them all the way through and realizing that playing what you hear is a saying and it's the truth, but it's not what we all are in touch with naturally. Okay. So, you know, we can move our fingers around a lot on the guitar, especially, you know, we can train ourselves to play a scale really fast and then move our fingers back and forth on that scale. That has nothing to do with making music. That has nothing to do with making a melody that you imagine and you hear and you produce in the moment on a chord or a set of chords. These are two separate things. How do we get in touch with that? I don't know. I know that first, I was blessed to be in touch with that from the very beginning. Like I would never allow myself to just let my fingers move. And I was always trying to play something that made sense to myself. And so I had to find the notes that worked on a chord or a progression, and then find my way around to other notes. That was a process. And I played very slowly and methodically or something. I was very careful in the beginning. The way that I countered that was by trying to infuse as much feeling in that kind of simple presentation as I could. And that was my way going forward. That won't be everyone's way. But in some ways I have to make students aware that can sing that, what you just played. They can't. Like what, okay, what were you trying to play? And then they're reaching for it on the guitar. It's not on the guitar. I mean, it is, but you're not going to find it like that. You have to be able to. So, you know, it's just, this is not a cut and paste or a, you know, everybody's different and we have to approach everyone differently. And ooh, it's really something, really, really something. Yeah. So I don't know if that works in today's world because, you know, we're getting all this information that everything is fast and right now. But that's really not how it goes most often, I think.
I think it's really valuable that you said that because of that reason. Because I think that even though the message comes sometimes that things are supposed to be fast and they're supposed to be right now and they're supposed to be right at your fingertips, we all want something deeper, you know, whether you know it or not. And I think that's a part of some of the things that our students have to deal with coming out of this time when we were apart, and also with all of this technology that they are trying to find their way back in some ways or their way to something deeper. And I think it's really valuable to hear you talk about that. That's just the way it is for everybody with what we do. Yeah. There's a time factor and there's learning about yourself and learning about how you process your ears and your hands and the connections between them, which is not going to be the same. You can't just take your teacher's path and follow it and come up with yourself. You literally have to learn about yourself. And I think that's something that can be very hard for our students who haven't maybe had the same experiences that allowed them to look more inward when they're always looking like outward at the phone or at everything that's presented in that fashion. So
I would implore students though to listen to what your teachers are telling you and try to embrace it on some level.
Yeah,
because that's what you're paying for. The knowledge and the wisdom is there. You have to process it in your way.
right.
And that's really what it is. Your teachers are not telling you something just to be a drag or just to make you feel bad. You know, they're quite the opposite.
I think sometimes too, like when you don't know where you want to go, you have to trust that person who's been down a road before you. Yeah. And you have to really give yourself over to that process. Yeah. And, you know, when you have the good fortune to sit with someone who's a master of our instrument or is farther along than you are, however you think of it, and they're saying to you, I value this, and I think this is an important thing for you to work on. I really think I agree with you. You have to just take that on trust and really go for it.
Yeah.
And then you'll find your own way but you have to go farther first.
Yeah.
You can't just like sit back and say, well, I don't know, what do you got for me today? And have the separate, you got to dive in, I think. And the only way you dive in is with trusting your teacher.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much for all this insight that you've been sharing with us. And, as we kind of come to the end of our coffee here today, I'm wondering to go around, what's on everybody's mind. Like, Ben, do you have a final thought that's on your mind today?
Well, I think, Bobby really made a good point, when we kind of went in depth of, what's the question that you think everyone should be asking. It sounds to me the question really is, why am I doing this? And that's something that I think like someone else, I don't mean it in a funny way, but it's something that you really ask yourself. And I can think of a good few dozen times I've asked myself that in so many different points of my career, whether I was starting out playing in middle school, high school, college, professionally, and I think that you always need to have an answer for yourself, but it's not always going to be the same answer. And I think that's something that it's just having the awareness of that can get you a lot of mileage, as a musician.
Sheryl, what about you?
Well, thanks for joining us. I know you have a busy schedule and a busy day. Yeah, really great stuff. I know folks are going to want to listen to this over and over again. And it's cool because we have so many genres that visit this podcast, and there's a universal place where we all meet in terms of like these things about facing your fears and like what motivates you to work on these things and what are important ways to start to develop them. So thanks for sharing all that great info with us.
Great.
So, Professor Broom, do you have a final thought you'd like to share with the students in particular who are listening?
Yeah, I'll share my reasons for sticking with this. It's because I love music. I loved music before I started playing the guitar. I absolutely adored music. The songs would come on the radio. They felt like I was seeing my friends, okay? So when I decided to play the guitar, that was also because I loved the possibility of being able to do what I aspired to do that I heard someone else do in that way, not exactly like them or sound like them or any of that stuff, those details, but in general, to be able to do that thing, to express myself freely and clearly and abundantly in music. Goes beyond style or genre or whatever. And when I ask myself that question in the toughest of times, that's always been my answer. I didn't always like it because it didn't like answer the specific situation, but the big reason is always that supersedes everything. No matter what happens, I just love music. Now, fortunately, I've been gifted and have been able to, like, I have some talent or whatever, so good. But ultimately, I love music and I have to keep figuring it out and trying to go through life with it. That's the answer for me. So hopefully you do too. And that can provide enough of a reason for you if this is what you want to do.
I love that. I think it's the perfect way to leave everyone. And I agree with Sheryl. I hope that everyone listens to this episode more than once because there's a lot of great wisdom here. So the four of us are going to continue to hang out for a little longer, but we're so glad that everybody else was able to listen. And we will be with you all on the next Coffee Talk.